What is your bullet ducking dodge moment? The night of the Aurora Theater shooting in Colorado, some friends and I had planned to go to the Aurora movie theater for Batman, as we are all huge Batman fans. One of my friends convinced us to go to a different theater that was closer to her since she couldn't get a ride. Couple people we were supposed to meet up with in Aurora were in the theater, but luckily got out unharmed. Guess that's a bullet dodged. I once went on a date with this guy who used the entire conversation to try and figure out how much I would be missed. The hairs on the back of my neck were tingling for the only time in my life as he asked me about every friend, family member, co-worker, roommate, how often I saw them, how long I would go between texting and calling. Needless to say, I suddenly had 5 overprotective older brothers who were pies and cops. Not me, but I had a hand in it. Knew this guy in high school peripherally. He was in the cool crowd of rocker type guys, and I was a nerd. New girl arrived at our school from another town. She and I became friends, and a few months later she started dating him. At first she seemed cool, and we would talk about everything. At one point, however, she starts talking about how she has been hooking up with her ex-boyfriend behind cool guy's back. Just before the end of the school year, she tells me she is pregnant and that she knows it belongs to her ex-boyfriend. She is laughing and really proud of herself because cool guy is going to do the right thing, withdraw his college application and go work at the local gas station to support her and the baby. Her ex, the father of the baby, is kind of a loser, so she thinks it's the best thing even that she can duck him while making cool guy support her. I didn't really know this guy that well, but I got his phone number from an acquaintance of mine who knew it. Cool guy knew I was friends with his girlfriend, but was still pretty surprised to hear from me. I told him all about her ploy, and said get a paternity test, it isn't yours. This guy was incredibly stoic, but after a sizable pause he just broke down crying for a few minutes, then thanked me. They broke up, and cool guy went to college and made something of his life. My ex-boyfriend told me he was sterile. I started insisting on condoms anyway, just in case. Eventually I broke up with him. He currently has 2 kids with the girl he started dating after me. I once took a girl online out to dinner at a nicer place in our town. She was horrible to the server and actually got us kicked out because she called the manager a cunt. After that we were walking out and she wanted me to go back to her place to watch a movie, which I refused and went home. 2 months later I was reading the paper and saw her in the police blotter for assaulting her boyfriend with a golf club. Don't know if it's a dodge a bullet moment, but it felt like I did. Afghanistan a few years ago. Having a smoke late at night with our local cultural advisor, LCA, and a bullet whistled right over our heads for my very first time. I looked at our LCA and asked him what the duck that was, and as he took another drag from his smoke, unfazed, he said with a thick Pashtun accent, "You ducking idiot. That was a bullet. You should sit down with me before you get your head shot off by the next round." And well, what can I say? My LCA saved my life because as soon as I did sit my ass down on the Afghanistan dirt, another bullet came whistling by. Thank you, Bilal. When I was 7 I got lost in Spain without my family. I had been lost for about 5 hours. Really late at night and had been going down some dark alleyways and car parks. I started asking random strangers if they spoke English, but there were only middle-aged men walking around alone. One guy didn't speak English, but gave me a cuddle and took me back to his house around the corner. At this point I'm crying my eyes out and just appreciated the help and kindness. When I got to his house it turned out he had a family and the son was learning English in school. He got out his school workbook and asked me my name. Then they took me to the police station. My parents picked me up about 10 minutes later as they were driving around in a police car. That man could have been anyone, and I could have been kidnapped and never seen again. Not your ordinary bullet dodge. When I was back in high school, I was walking near the field when they were practicing their discus throw. One of the discus was wrongly thrown and was headed for my head. A friend who at that time was walking towards me saw this and yelled for me to duck. The discus went past my head and landed behind me. Then I realized that I could have died if my friend hadn't warned me. Imagine a 2-kilogram flying disc lands right on your forehead. Was traveling to somewhere on a highway behind a logging truck. When we were going uphill, the truck changed lanes and a log slipped off. bounced between the car I was in and another car, and rebounded off the highway into the nearby forest. There was no one immediately behind us. Edit. Hit comment instead of edit. Screw it. My accidental edit is somewhere in the comments. Really crushed on this girl. She rejected me. About a year later she had a baby with a guy. Turned out she'd been poking holes in the condoms because she was obsessed with having a baby. I almost fell for an MLM scam disguised as a secret business opportunity. I was talking to this girl at a party and I was really into her. I have some obscure interests and she was the first attractive girl I'd ever met with the same interests. Well, my brother swooped in and charmed her way more than my awkwardness could hope to. I was pissed at first that he stole her, but got over it after she lied about birth control, got pregnant, and tried to convince him to marry her. The thing is, I'm a lot more go with the flow than my brother is. If I had knocked her up and she told me we needed to get married, there's a good chance I would have done it. Then I'd be stuck with a person who I've learned is an absolute show of crazy. When I was about 23, I was asked on a date by a Brazilian girl who was maybe early 30s. We went on a date, but it wasn't the most interesting evening. We didn't really click and the language barrier meant we couldn't really get past basic conversation. I was a little resistant to go on a second date and felt it was fair game to say sorry I didn't think we clicked. Next time I saw her in person though I was berated with a bunch of insults hurled as she claimed we were supposed to get married and have kids and that I was the one. Very glad I was able to back away slowly and dodge that bullet. Senior in high school, and a pair of twin girls with obvious behavioral issues got pretty aggressive with me to duck them both. They lived a block away so we rode the same school bus. I was getting a weird vibe and definitely had a this is too good to be true feeling from it. Every day on the bus ride home from school they tried to convince me to come over to their place. They were super trashy white chubby girls and I just didn't know how to handle it. So I basically avoided them until I got a car and started driving home instead of using the bus. Eventually after a month or so of stupid flirting and stalking, one of them got one of the other kids on the bus to hook up with them. He got them both pregnant, one with twins. They lied and said they were on the pill. Both of them wanted him to marry them, and it got really bitter and nasty between the two girls. Parents kicked them out. He was black and their parents weren't very happy, and then the dude had to bail on his college plans to support 3 kids and pay 2 women for child support at 18. They all got heavy into oxy and are in and out of jail. On temp job I'd made several hours of corrections on a long document saving version after version. When finished I deleted all the extra copies and emptied the trash only to realize the one copy I saved was the untouched original. It was a busy office but as my heart sank someone announced, "Everyone stop what you're doing. We just lost funding on the project. You'll be paid through the day but you're free to go. Never empty the trash." Edit typo. Almost married a Marine and then found out 6 months later. He was court-martialed for getting wasted, having 6 right off base, and then went to wall. Yeah, he landed in jail. Back when I was young and impressionable, someone stopped me on the street and asked if I'd like to do a free personality test. After enthusiastically filling out the answers to a long list of probing questions, the person who'd approached me asked how old I was. Since I was under 18 they said they'd have to get a parent's permission to give me my results. They call my mum, who tells them to stick their test up their ass, or words to that effect, then proceeds to give me an extended talking to about trusting strange people with my personal information. And that's how I learned who the Church of Scientology were. New teacher started at my high school at the start of the year. Integrated fine. Students were assigned a pair of teachers to pay special attention to their academic needs. He was one of mine. Because of this, he knew I had a tense relationship with my parents. Because of the occasional sensitive material we covered in his English class, which I also took, he knew I had a telling sensitivity to sexual violence. As a teacher, he knew I was a troubled kid with a shaky support network. He gave me off-base but evidently well-intentioned advice about managing my controlling parents. Worked with me and my other overseeing teacher to try and make school less nightmarish for me, and overall seemed like a warm, engaging guy. He gave some people the willies, but I felt fine around him. Then, middle of the week a few months into the year, he doesn't show up. We're told he's not employed here anymore. No official details. As you maybe guessed, turned out he had an alleged history of sexually abusing students at past jobs. I don't know how it had been handled that they were able to find this out without him having tripped any of the flags I assume exist in the screening for potential teachers. But I guess better late than never. I don't think the school ever got, like, prosecuted for ducking up or whatever. So I guess it was an understandable miss. But yeah, that would have been pretty ducking awful. I got lucky. Me and any other kids he might have been charming. Was bouldering unprotected in the Owens Valley like an idiot. Descending. Slipped. Fell 6 feet down with outward momentum onto a 10-foot wide shelf. Only just stopping myself before the 50-foot drop to death injury pain. Still spooks the hell out of me to think about. Edit. Scrambling. I had a type of bone cancer, Ewing's sarcoma, when I was 10. It usually shows up in the bone itself, which usually makes one lose whichever limb the bone is in. Mine, fortunately, started in the surrounding flesh and was working its way towards the bone. The tumor grew so fast that I only realized it when I bumped my leg against a rock that I should not have hit. The tumor was about the size of a softball. Because of finding it like this, we got to it early enough that it could be removed before it reached the bone. I still got 9 months of chemo to make sure it was all removed though. I kept my leg, although I have a large scar on the outside of my left leg above the knee running to mid-thigh, and a large dip in the same area. Also have some kidney damage relating to the type of chemo they gave me. Although things are looking up there, this May I was 6 years cancer free, and I would have lost my leg if we wouldn't have caught it any later. Edit. Thanks to everyone that gave their congratulations. And my condolences to those who have lost someone to ES. I had my police car pulled over off the side of this rural road, with the emergency lights on. I had stopped because there was a man splayed out in the middle of the asphalt. Turns out he was super drunk and decided to take a nap during his walk home. I had just helped him to his feet, and placed him in the back of the car to drive him home, when I hear an engine revving hard. I closed the car door, and straightened up. Just in time to have my car smashed out from in front of me by a pickup truck. I felt the truck's side mirror clip my body armor. The driver was drunk and had decided to go looking for his drunk friend. That friend was the guy I just picked up. The guy in the backseat survived the impact because those old Crown Victorias had massive trunks. The driver went to the hospital, and in the coming months, he pleaded guilty to impaired driving. I remember the collision analysis showed that the guy hit my car at 145 km/h. It was a wild night, and I still have major hang-ups when I have to stop my police car on roadways. Knocked my GF up, was supportive and told her I'd take care of her and the baby. She decided we weren't ready so got an abortion. A week later after that found out she had been cheating on me. Def the type to use said child as a weapon too. I ran out of fuel once. Normally, that wouldn't be so bad but I was flying a Cessna 152 over the Mojave Desert at the time. It's really not a bad glider. I had to land on the highway. The landing went perfectly. The CHP pilot, with whom I was in communication during my unpowered descent, landed at the nearby airport and brought me 10 gallons of avgas. I climbed on the wing and dumped it in. The CHP blocked off both ends of the road fuse as a runway and I took off into the sunset. Got dumped by my ex. Like a typical movie sad at the time very antisocial dude, I was sad and depressed because I had been dumped. After all, I had been dumped for another man. So I did have a feeling of just not being good enough instead of being in a relationship that didn't work out. After a while she starts sending some messages. We talk a bit and suddenly we start fighting. She was the first one I had opened up to and told my thoughts deep down that I hid for everyone else, and she threw them back in my face in the most hurtful manner. I was shocked. When I reflected about it I realized she had been doing it during our relationship too. We'd have an argument. I'd present my points of view in a calm manner etc. and she'd just suddenly fling it to wind me up. Later found out she also had lied to me about her age and was just barely legal when we hooked up. Treated myself to a nice pizza and a good bottle of scotch to celebrate the dodge bullet. I had a co-worker who was an avid runner. He was really thin and in good shape. I ran into him in public with his family for the first time. He was with an obese woman who looked to be much older than him. After greeting him, I, stupidly, naively, was 2 seconds from saying "and this must be your mom," before he cut me off and said "Silisks. Meet my wife Laura." Edit. Thanks for the upvotes. In my defense, it was around Christmas and I had heard he was having relatives visit. Saying bullet ducking dodged really downplays the seriousness of this situation. When I was in my early 20s, I went out to the bar with some friends one night. My friend was DD and I was drinking. I had a very solid buzz going on when I bumped into someone I knew from HS who was clearly flirting with me. I ended up leaving my friends and catching a cab back to her apartment. The next morning I found out my friend who was supposed to DD got drunk then behind the wheel. He ended up getting into an accident and, while no one had any critical injuries, there were a few broken bones. etc. I could have very easily have been in that car. Instead I had sex with my now wife. Talk about fate. I was making a day trip in Colorado to do some sightseeing. It was just me and the dog, driving a few hours over Wolf Creek Pass. I felt a little off and stopped up near the top of the pass to get some fresh air at a waterfall. I figured I was just sleepy and at altitude, so I decided to actually hike the mile round trip to the falls and wake up a bit. On the way back down the trail I had a seizure. If I'd not stopped I would have been coming down the pass when it happened. Worked for a campus PD while I was in college. Had been, unsuccessfully, flirting a bit with one of our part-time clerks who was a mother twice over at 22. Living in Section 8 housing etc. Not a bad thing in and of itself. Just providing some context. My longtime girlfriend had bounced a few months back, so I had thrown myself into my work and was advancing quickly in the department. Well enough that I had a salaried slot on the horizon. Feeling good about things in general, I figured I'd just roll with it when she suddenly started giving me the time of day. Had our first big night of romance coming on a Saturday night when I get a text from OFC. Derp that just said cancel. Now. WTTYL. Wasn't sure WTF was up, but I did just that. Called her up on the spot and said sorry. Problem with my car. No way I could get it to her shop and out in time for our date. She didn't have a car. Few hours later I swing by the PD and he told me what had happened. She had worked earlier in the day and was at the front desk not realizing OFC. Dirk was in the squad room. You can hear conversations up front from there. He overheard her on her cell talking to one of her girlfriends about how she was going to get paid tonight, girl. Followed by no. I'm only like 5 weeks. He won't be able to tell cause the dates will be close. Comma. God bless you, Brian. God bless you. Dated this guy briefly in college. He got into a horse riding accident early on in the relationship. Horse fell on him. Broke his ankle, pelvis and hip. Apparently had a prior addiction to pain pills I was completely oblivious to. He quickly relapsed and turned into a crazy ass pill popping psycho. Tried sticking it out and helping him. I did my best and I couldn't handle it. When I told him I was done with the relationship, he proceeded to call me the worst names in the world, begged me to forgive him and then tried asking me to come hang out after he had called me the biggest slut in town. WTF. He then started doing meth and has been involved in a hit and run accident. The guy he hit died. X moved the body, fled the scene, dumped his truck in a parking lot that had a surveillance camera in it. He did get caught for it. Talk about bullet dodged. I've had some pretty crappy relationships apparently. I was trying to hook up with a girl I met on some dating app. Neither of us could host, so I figured it was a lost cause. Then she started acting crazy, like she was so special I was supposed to fight for her, and because I wasn't, I was abandoning her, like all the other men in her life. I'm like, lady, I barely know you. Calm down. I was walking back from work at 11 PM. I work close to home, and I go to cross the road because neither of the 2 cars behind me had their turning signal on. Halfway through, the guy in the second car yells, "Hey kid," at me. I back up a bit and the first car takes the sharpest left turn I had ever seen, and when I saw the driver's face, he looked completely dead or emotionless. I couldn't even see his eyes, but that is probably just a trick of the light. The second guy pulls up. I thank him for not letting me become a pancake. He explains that he thinks that guy was completely drunk. I thought it made sense at the time, but whenever I look back I don't think he was drunk. I saw his face and he seemed more dead than intoxicated. I went on one date with a girl I worked with. She was cute but there were red flags. Some obvious, some not so much. She had been in jail and had an ankle monitor. That was probably the biggest red flag. Other than that, she just seemed a little off. Things fizzled easily enough between us. No harm done and we didn't even do anything to make life at work awkward. Then a co-worker starts dating her and before too long both of them weren't working there anymore for unrelated reasons. We end up finding out later she murdered the guy. She stabbed him like 20-30 times in the back with a kitchen knife. It was very sad. He was a good guy and definitely didn't deserve to go out like that. I learned this all secondhand from mutual friends after I had lost contact with him. Meningitis. 2:30 am. Couldn't sleep. 3:30 am I'm having spinal taps done at a medical center. 2 doctors gave me 15% survival upon arrival. 24 hours later I moved to ICU for the next 8 days. Last day in hospital they told me I'd dodge a bullet matrix style and should not be here. Skipped class to watch a segment on a morning talk show with my favorite actor. Avoided a school shooting. Had I gone, I would have been in the cafeteria right when and where the shooter started his spree. Going into our second year of university, a group of us were looking for houses together. We'd found one we liked and were sitting down with the estate agent to sign the paperwork. Out of nowhere, one of the group started hysterically crying and ran out of the room shouting, "I can't live there. It's got mildew and I'm allergic." He didn't end up living with her, but the people who did had a year of her brazenly stealing their phones, money, clothes and boyfriends. Bullet dodged. I don't duck with guns. I really don't. During undergrad, 3 friends of mine and I went to my buddy's farm and he whipped out a rifle. We were all kinda drunk and he decided we should shoot random it. He picked up some plates, bottles, stumps and put them all over. When it was my turn, I told him I didn't want to shoot it because I don't feel comfortable. He points it at me and says, "Come on buddy, it isn't scary," and my other friend kicks the gun off his hands. Dude, the safety. I'm not sure if I would have gotten shot that day, but I honestly didn't want to find out. I owe my friend a lot. Lol. The time I paid $1,600 for a prenatal paternity test. Kid wasn't mine and the test saved me from months of agony at the hands of a batshit crazy, violent and pregnant slut. Best money I've ever spent. I had been talking to a guy for a couple weeks, and we'd gone on 2 dates, which were fine. I liked him enough to bring him to my friend's house for a small gathering. That night, he started acting really strange, like he was on something. I could sense that he was making everyone uncomfortable, so we ended up leaving early. I brought him home and went back to my own place. Later that night my friend texted me that something had seemed off about him and she had decided to Google the guy. She found some pretty weird stuff about him, weird videos he'd posted online that made him look like a total creep, and that he had a DUI that he had lied to me about. Knowing that my previous BF had a drinking problem, needless to say, I ended things right then and there, although he texted me incessantly for about a week after. I was so glad I found out he was a creep before things had progressed anymore, and my skin crawled thinking about what might have happened. So in 2006 I was losing weight so that I could finally afford health insurance. I figured out that if I lost 60 pounds, $5,000 deductible plan would be roughly $100 more cheaper. In 2007 I've lost the weight and I get insurance on the 1st of February and go to get my first checkup in a long while. Everything comes back clean. The 15th of March I go home and my dad, a physician, doesn't like the look of me and takes me to get some scans. Turns out the weight I lost was due to cancer and the previous doc had ducked up and not run the right tests. But because he had ducked up and given me a clean bill of health, the insurance company couldn't claim that the cancer was a pre-existing condition despite my having insurance for less than 90 days. Cancer is all gone, but I didn't get stuck with a $500,000 hospital bill because of a doc who ducked up. I was using a steak knife to try and unlock a bathroom door by trying to move the metal thing. I'm sure it's got a name, but I don't know what. Tumbler maybe. Holding it into the door jamb. Stupidly, I was doing this from the bottom with as much pressure as I could manage. So when the knife invariably slipped, the blade slammed into my skull a tiny bit above my left eyeball. It took me 2 minutes to pull my hand away to check if I could see. I thought I had skewered my eye for sure, and definitely deserved to. Bullet dodged.